The sky over Sector 9 was always gray, not from clouds, but from the thick metal shields that hung above the city like a lid. The shields never opened. Sunlight was artificial here, cold, pale, and timed by the council. Every morning at 6, the lights blinked on. Every night at 10, they went dark. No stars. No moon. Just the quiet hum of machines and the low whir of patrol drones. Mira Solon moved through the crowd with her head down, just like everyone else. Around her, workers in faded uniforms shuffled into narrow tunnels and metal walkways, heading toward their daily stations. No one spoke unless necessary. It was safer that way. Mira was 19, thin and quiet, with sharp eyes that noticed things most people ignored. She worked as a tech fixer, one of the humans allowed to repair broken surveillance drones and security panels. It was a job that required skill, but not too much freedom. The council liked humans who could follow orders, not ones who asked questions. She entered the drone bay where dozens of broken machines waited on long metal tables. Her fingers moved quickly, prying open a damaged panel with a tool she'd made from a spoon and a bit of wire. Every drone had layers: surveillance core, audio unit, memory grid. Mira knew them all. She had learned from her older brother, Jalen, who used to fix machines like they were puzzles waiting to be solved. He wasn't here anymore. They had taken Jalen 6 months ago. Council officers came in the middle of the night, silent and smooth, their faces hidden by black visors. They said he'd been flagged for questioning. He never came back. Mira didn't ask where he went. No one ever asked. That was how Sector 9 survived, by forgetting. But Mira didn't forget. Her hands paused over a cracked drone casing. It was an older model, the kind Jalen used to work on. Something about the way it had been fixed before. It looked familiar. Sloppy, but fast, like someone had tried to hide something. Mira lifted the panel carefully and saw a strange wire tucked under the memory unit. That wasn't standard. Her heart began to race. She disconnected the drone's power and slipped it into her tool bag. If anyone saw her, she'd be reported. But she had to know. She couldn't explain why, just that it felt like something important. Back in her small living pod, Mira locked the door and drew the curtain. The room was barely large enough for a bed and a workbench. A cold blue light glowed from the wall. She placed the drone on the bench and opened it completely. Inside, hidden beneath layers of shielding, was a small data chip. Her hands trembled as she connected it to a portable reader she kept hidden behind the wall panel. The screen flickered, then buzzed to life. A voice spoke through the static. Mira, if you're hearing this, it means I didn't make it back. But I found something. A way out. There are others. You're not alone. Trust the fire inside. It was Jalen's voice. Mira froze. The voice cut off. The file was corrupted, broken, maybe damaged by age or the council's interference. She sat in silence for a long time, staring at the screen. This wasn't just a message. It was a spark. The first spark she had felt since Jalen was taken. For months she had lived like the others, quiet, afraid, obedient. But now, something stirred in her chest. Hope. The council had taught them to fear strength, to believe resistance was useless. But maybe they were wrong. Maybe strength wasn't in fists or weapons. Maybe it was in voices, in memories, in the quiet fire that refused to die. Mira stood slowly and looked out through the slats in her curtain. The city was still gray, still silent. But for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel empty. She turned back to the drone, her jaw set. She was going to find out what Jalen meant, and she was going to finish what he started. The next morning, Sector 9 moved like it always did, silent, cold, and full of tired faces. But Mira felt different. She walked to the drone bay with her heart pounding, every step heavy with purpose. She tried to look calm, normal, invisible, like she always did. But her mind raced with questions. Jalen's voice. A way out. Others like him. She couldn't forget the message. It had been brief and broken, but it was real. He had found something. Maybe he had even started something. The idea stayed with her like a light burning in the dark. Inside the drone bay, she moved straight to her workbench, pretending to ignore the others. The overseer strolled past in silence, checking workstations with his arms behind his back. Mira didn't look up. She couldn't risk being watched too closely. She had brought the chip with her, hidden inside the hollow handle of her tool wrench. If they scanned her, she was finished. But she had to find out more. She began working on another old drone, but her real focus was on her own device. At break, she slipped away to the storage closet where the signal blockers were weak. There, she connected the chip again to her portable reader. She replayed the message. Mira, If you're hearing this, it means I didn't make it back. But I found something. A way out. There are others. Static cut in again. She frowned and tapped the reader. The audio was scrambled, but the chip still held data. A second file blinked on the screen, corrupted, but labeled with a number, log 42 Chain Ember. Chain Ember? It wasn't a name she knew. Maybe it was a code or a place. She tried to open the file, but it was locked behind an encryption wall. She'd need more time and better tools. As she backed out of the system, she felt a shadow pass the door. Her eyes widened. She waited, not moving, barely breathing. No one opened the door. After a full minute, she slipped the chip back into her wrench and returned to her station. That evening, Mira walked home carefully, watching for patrol drones. Her boots echoed softly on the metal pathways. Sector 9 felt colder than usual. People were even quieter than normal, their eyes avoiding one another. Something felt wrong. She reached her pod just as the lights dimmed for the night cycle. Once inside, she turned on her desk lamp and began to study the drone Jalen had hidden the chip in. Why this model? What made it different? Then she saw it. Scratched into the inside wall of the drone casing, nearly invisible, was a symbol, a small circle with 3 lines branching off from it, like a star or flame. It was hand-carved. Human. She had never seen that symbol before, but she knew it meant something. She sat back, thinking hard. The message. The log file. The symbol. Chain Ember, she whispered to herself. Is that what they called themselves? A group. Suddenly, there was a knock at her door. Sharp. 2 times. Her heart jumped. She quickly hid the drone and the reader. Her hand hovered near a hidden blade under the desk, just in case. Mira, a voice whispered through the door. It's me. Tav. She opened the door slowly. Her best friend, Havrin, stepped inside quickly and shut it behind him. He was Myra's age, with a calm face and steady hands. They had known each other since they were kids, repairing scrap metal behind the dorms. You okay? She asked. No, Tav said. They scanned our workroom today. Full sweep. They took Kara. No reason given. Just gone. Mira felt a chill run through her. Kara had been quiet. Careful. Just like the rest of them. Tav looked at her closely. You've been acting different. Since yesterday. Is there something you're not telling me? Mira hesitated. Her mind told her to lie, to protect the secret. But her gut said otherwise. Tav was loyal. He had always had her back. She walked to her desk and pulled out the chip from her tool. It's Jalen, she said quietly. He left this. A message. He found something. Maybe a group. Tav stared at it. That's Council Tech. No, Mira said. It's human now. He used it to hide the message. Tav took a breath. Mira, if they catch you with that, I know, she said. Silence filled the room. Then he asked, what do you want to do? She looked him in the eye. I want to know what Chain Ember means. I want to find them. Tav didn't speak for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. Okay. Then I'm with you. Mira smiled, small but real. She hadn't smiled in months. Outside, the city lights dimmed again. But inside Myra's pod, something had changed. Hope was growing. Not loud, not bright. Just a spark. But sometimes, that's all it takes to start a fire. The next few days passed slowly, each hour heavy with silence and caution. Mira went to work as usual. She fixed drones, ran system checks, and kept her head down. But her mind stayed locked on one thing, Chain Ember. The chip Jalen left behind still held that broken log file. Mira couldn't crack it with her tools alone. She needed more data, more clues. That meant finding more drones like the one Jalen had hidden the message in. Older models. Ones he might have used before the council took him. So, during her breaks, Mira began searching the drone disposal yard behind the maintenance bay. It was off limits, but the gate was loose and unguarded during shift changes. She waited until the cameras turned away and slipped through the gap. The yard was a graveyard of metal and silence. Drones lay stacked in rusting towers, their parts scavenged and forgotten. Mira dug carefully, looking for anything with the same model code as Jalen's last drone. After 2 nights of searching, she found it. A battered unit, cracked and barely holding together. But inside, just like before, was a data chip, wedged into the frame. She brought it home without a word. That night, while Tev kept watch, Mira connected the chip to her reader. A new message played. This one wasn't a voice. It was text, old code written in Earth Standard language. Chain Ember lives in the underwires. Seek the low flame. Grid 6, Valve Room 3. She read it twice, then 3 more times. It was a location. A real place. Mira grabbed her map of Sector 9, an old maintenance schematic stolen from a trash bin months ago. She traced the path. Grid 6 was far from the main sectors, near the edge of the underground heat pipes. Most of those areas were off-limits due to unstable pressure. But that also meant no patrols. The low flame, Mira whispered. It's real. The next morning, she and Tav packed tools, a flashlight, and ration bars. They waited until lights out, then slipped out through the waste tunnels. It was dangerous, filthy, narrow, and filled with old machinery, but they moved quickly and quietly. Hours passed. When they reached Valve Room 3, it was nearly silent, except for the hiss of hot steam. The room was dark, lit only by blinking red indicators. Mira searched the walls for signs, marks, scratches, anything human. Then she saw it. The same symbol she had found inside Jalen's drone, a small circle with 3 lines branching off like a flame. It had been burned into the wall with a plasma cutter. Tav looked at her. It's real. Mira nodded. Her heart pounded. She pressed the wall near the symbol. Nothing happened. She pressed again, this time harder, with both hands. A click echoed through the pipes. The wall shifted. A narrow door opened, revealing a stairwell that led down into the dark. Mira didn't hesitate. She grabbed the flashlight and stepped through, with Tav close behind. The stairwell wound down deeper than they expected. At the bottom, a door opened into a wide chamber filled with soft, warm light. And people, 10 or more, humans, young, old, all staring at the 2 newcomers. Some looked shocked, others curious. A few reached for tools or makeshift weapons. But one stepped forward, lowering his hood. He was tall, with deep lines on his face and a calm, serious gaze. You're Mira, he said. She blinked. How do you know that? He held up a small device. It played Jalen's voice. If she finds you, let her in. She's stronger than she knows. The man smiled gently. I'm Corin. Jalen was one of us. One of the first. We've been waiting for you. Mira felt her knees weaken. She stepped forward slowly, eyes wide, scanning the room. The chamber was filled with old tech, broken drones, earth tools, power cells, nothing powerful, but everything important. It was a hidden workshop, a command center, a place of resistance, a place of hope. Your chain ember, Mira whispered. Corin nodded. We're the spark. The fire comes next. Tev stared at them. What do you do here? We remember, Corin said. We repair, rebuild, and wait for the moment to act. The council thinks we're weak. They fear our weapons. But they should fear our memory, our will, our hope. Mira looked around again. Every person in the room had eyes that burned with purpose. They weren't loud. They weren't angry. They were ready. And for the first time since Jalen disappeared, Mira didn't feel lost. She felt like she had finally come home. Myra's life changed after she found Chain Ember. By day, she still walked the gray paths of Sector 9, head down, hands busy. She repaired drones, answered to supervisors, and obeyed every silent rule the council had enforced for years. But at night, when the artificial lights dimmed and the city fell into its controlled quiet, Mira came alive. Inside the underground chamber of Chain Ember, she worked with others who had once given up hope. Together, they rebuilt old transmitters, studied scraps of forgotten history, and passed around damaged memory chips filled with recordings from Earth. Real trees, blue skies, laughter, music. Mira had never heard music before. The first time she listened, she cried. It reminded her of something she had never known but somehow still missed. Chain Ember didn't fight with weapons. They fought with memories, stories, ideas. They believed hope was more dangerous than strength because once hope took root, it could not be controlled. Corin, the quiet leader, gave Mira her first mission, spreading Jalen's message. She didn't need to scream it or print posters. That would only get people caught. Instead, she worked in whispers and small acts. She repaired a cleaning bot with a hidden audio file that played in empty halls late at night. You are not alone. The council fears our truth. Remember who you are. She etched the flame symbol into the wall of a supply tunnel near the water line, barely visible unless you knew to look. She passed tiny data chips, barely the size of a fingernail, to workers who seemed too tired to go on. Each chip carried a message, a song, a name from Earth. Just enough to make someone stop, think, feel. And it started to work. She saw it in the way people began to glance at each other again in the corridors. And how some smiled, just a little, when they passed her. And the quiet nods exchanged between strangers. Hope was spreading. But hope has a cost. One morning, Mira arrived at the drone bay to find the air thick with tension. The workers were lined up, silent and stiff. A black council transport hovered at the edge of the room, and a tall figure stepped out, Overseer Kelter. Mira had never seen him in person. His long coat swayed as he walked, and his eyes, sharp and cold, swept across the room like searchlights. "We are conducting a scan," he said. His voice was smooth, controlled. "There has been unauthorized data movement in this sector." No one spoke. Kelter pointed, and two council officers dragged a worker forward, Taff. Myra's stomach turned. Taff's face was calm, but his hands were clenched. The officers said nothing. They didn't accuse. They didn't explain. They simply led him away. Mira stepped forward without thinking. "Where are you taking him?" Kelter looked at her. "You are Mira Solon," he said. Not a question. A fact. She froze. "You repair units efficiently," he continued. "That is good. I suggest you keep your focus on your work." And then he turned and walked away, Tav vanishing behind him. That night, Mira returned to Chain Ember shaking with rage. "They took him," she told Corin. "He didn't do anything wrong." Corin's face was hard. "They don't need a reason. They fear what they can't see. They feel the shift. They know something is changing." "We can't just keep waiting," Mira said. Her voice trembled with fire. "We have messages. Tools. A signal tower at the city core. If we reach it, we can send a real broadcast. Not a whisper. A voice." Corin studied her. "You could be caught. They could trace it." "Then let them," Mira said. "I'm not hiding anymore." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Corin nodded. "We'll help you prepare." Over the next 2 nights, Chain Ember worked without rest. They built a mobile transmitter that could override the tower's controls for 30 seconds, just long enough for one message. Corin gave Mira a recording tool. "Say what you need to say," he told her. Mira hesitated, then pressed the record button. She thought of Earth, of her brother, of Tav. She thought of every person who had forgotten what it meant to feel free. "If you hear this, you are not alone. We are still here. We remember Earth. We remember freedom. They took our sky, our names, our future, but not our minds, not our fire. You feared our strength, but it is our hope that burns brightest." She saved the message and sealed the chip inside the transmitter. Tomorrow, she would walk into the heart of the city. Tomorrow, she would raise her voice where silence had ruled for too long. Tomorrow, the fire would rise. Mira stood at the edge of Central Grid 1, staring up at the tall steel tower that pierced the sky. It was the tallest structure in Sector 9, cold, quiet, and guarded by 4 council drones. The communication core, as it was called, was meant for council use only. It transmitted orders, alerts, and silent reminders of control to every corner of the sector. No one dared go near it unless ordered. But today, Mira would walk straight through its doors. She wore her technician uniform, the same dull gray as every other worker in Sector 9. Her tool belt was strapped tightly to her waist, but it carried more than just repair tools. Inside the pouch was a small black device, the transmitter built by Chain Ember, designed to hijack the tower's system for just 30 seconds. That was all the time she'd have. Her heart thudded in her chest as she stepped past the checkpoint. A drone scanned her ID. She held her breath. The light blinked green. She was in. The tower was colder than she expected. Inside, narrow metal stairs spiraled upward. She climbed quickly but carefully, eyes alert. Cameras were everywhere. She moved like a tech on assignment, calm, focused, ordinary. At the top level, she reached the control room. It was empty. Just screens, wires, and silence. Mira locked the door behind her. She took out the transmitter and plugged it into the main console. Lights blinked. A small screen flashed red, then green. She slid the chip into place, Jalen's message, her voice, their hope. System override detected, the console warned. Manual input required. She pressed the final command. A green light turned solid. The tower's signal had been captured. 30 seconds. She watched as her message began to broadcast across every worker terminal, every station speaker, and every private pod in Sector 9. For the first time in years, a voice other than the council's filled the air. "If you hear this, you are not alone. We are still here. We remember Earth. We remember freedom." Her voice echoed through the room, through the tower, through the city. "They took our sky, our names, our future, but not our minds, not our fire." Outside, people froze. Machines paused. Hands stopped working. For a moment, the entire sector went still. "You feared our strength, but it is our hope that burns brightest." Mira stared at the screen. The timer counted down. 3, 2, 1. The signal cut off. An alarm blared. Red lights flashed. She pulled the transmitter free and ran. But the council was faster. Drones descended like shadows. Doors sealed behind her. As she reached the lower level, Overseer Kelter stepped from the hallway, flanked by 2 guards. His face was calm as ever. "You should have stayed in the drone bay, Mira," he said. Mira stopped. She didn't raise her hands. She didn't speak. Kelter stepped closer. "Hope," he said. "That's what you think will save them. But it only brings chaos. Order is what keeps them alive." "They're not alive," Mira said. "They're surviving. Barely. You don't control peace. You smother it." Kelter's eyes narrowed. Before he could speak, a sound echoed outside. Footsteps. Many. Human. The guards turned. The hallway behind Mira filled with people, workers, old and young, standing shoulder to shoulder. Silent. Calm. Watching. They didn't yell. They didn't move. But they stood. Hundreds of them. And then more came, filling the square outside the tower. People who had heard the broadcast. People who had felt something stir inside. Something old and forgotten. Hope. Kelter looked out the window. His jaw clenched. "You don't understand," he muttered. "You've started something you can't control." Mira looked him in the eye. "It's not mine to control. It belongs to them now." Behind her, the crowd grew larger. Council drones hovered uncertainly. Orders were not given. No one dared attack. Because the fire had already started. And this time, it would not go out. The tower lights dimmed slowly as the alarms faded. Mira stood still, her heart still racing, but her hands no longer trembled. The sound of silence filled the space, not the cold kind that the council forced on people, but the kind that came when a storm had passed. She turned to the window and looked out. The square below the tower was full. Sector 9 had never seen anything like it. Hundreds of people stood shoulder to shoulder, not yelling, not chanting, just present. Just there. They had heard her voice. They had come. Overseer Kelter stood beside her, quiet. His jaw was tense. His guards stayed still, weapons unused. He watched the crowd like someone watching a wall crack, slowly, irreversibly. "You think this is victory," he said at last, "but it is disorder. You've made them unstable." Mira turned to face him. Her voice was calm. "No," she said. "I reminded them they're still human." Kelter said nothing. He looked at her, then at the people, then turned and walked away. His guards followed without a word. Mira didn't move. She stayed by the window, watching. Down below, people began to step closer to one another. Some reached for hands. Some simply nodded. They were still afraid, but the fear was no longer in control. Mira made her way back down the tower steps. When she stepped outside, the crowd parted for her, not out of fear, but respect. She walked through them in silence. One worker handed her a folded cloth. Inside was a hand-drawn version of the flame symbol. Mira held it tightly in her palm. Another gave her a scrap of wire with Jalen's name etched into it. Wordlessly, they honored her. And not just her, what she stood for. Tef's face wasn't among them, but Mira believed he had heard. Somewhere, he had listened. She would find him. Back underground, Chain Ember's hideout buzzed with quiet energy. Corin met her at the entrance. "You lit the fire," he said. "Now we keep it burning." Mira sat with the others and listened as they spoke, not in whispers, but with steady voices. Plans were forming. New messages. New ways to reach other sectors. No one talked of war. They talked of truth. Of memory. Of rebuilding. That night, Mira walked alone through Sector 9. The patrol drones were fewer now. Overseers had withdrawn, unsure of what to do. The council would not fall overnight. It would adapt. Try to reclaim control. But something had changed, something that couldn't be reversed. Hope had returned, and once it finds its way into people's hearts, it doesn't leave easily. Mira stopped near the old tunnel wall where she had once carved the flame symbol. Someone had drawn dozens more beside it. Bigger. Brighter. She smiled and placed her hand against the cold steel. Jalen had started the chain. Mira had carried it forward. Now, it belonged to everyone. She looked up, imagining the stars beyond the metal sky. One day, she thought, they would see them again. But for now, they had something just as powerful. They had each other. And they had hope.